Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Jazz Tangcay, Senior Artisans Editor from Variety. Before we're joined by our guest today, I want to let you know that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to SAG-AFTRA artists. This conversation is made possible thanks to the generosity of our supporters. Over the past year, the foundation has given nearly $7 million in COVID relief to more than 7,000 performers. If you are a SAG-AFTRA artist and need help, please ask. And if you can give help, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video, and thank you for your support. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce actor, filmmaker, and writer Justin Chon of Blue Bayou. Justin, welcome to today's conversation. And thank you for joining us. I have to say, your work and Blue Bayou is so incredible, along with that message that is so powerful. Talk about how the genesis of the film, and finding your way into researching this story.
Yes. So, I have quite a few adoptee friends. The idea of international adoption originated in South Korea after the war. So, Korea and Koreans have a long history of international adoption. So naturally, I have a lot of Korean adoptee friends. But, I started to hear that this was taking place, that adoptees were being deported. And then, I went on the internet, found some articles, found videos about the and all sort of different kind of, adoptees that were being affected. Some people working for the government that apply for a DoD job, or, some people, get picked up for a minor infraction or get picked up for a crime, triggers ICE to look and see. And I just frankly thought it was shocking. But I also realized that this is not like a simple fix. You would think, surely they're brought here by U.S. citizens. The government, approved of this adoption. Money was exchanged. A little child is brought overseas. So of course it can be fixed, right? But through more research and talking to an immigration lawyer, it's not. It's a long, arduous process, and a lot of times you can't stay. So I thought that was really shocking. Then what I did was I talked to a lot of normal people, and I would ask, "Hey, did you know this was going on?" And nobody knew. Not one person knew that this was an issue in immigration law. So I was like, "Oh man, this is a film that I feel like if I don't know how people will hear about this, and as we all know with legislation, it's a matter of exposure, and the more exposure an issue has, the more likely there's a chance for it to be rectified or changed or dealt with."
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I didn't know about this either till after I saw the movie, and I came back and I started, going down that rabbit hole of the internet, and you're like, wow, these are, you're reading stories. I mean, now that, in-person screenings have started happening, and, you mentioned just before this, we started that you were doing in-person Q&As. What is it like now that the film is out there in the world and you're standing there after a Q&A, hearing reactions and having people maybe share their stories? What's that been like for you?
I mean, it's really what this is about. It's film is meant to create discussion and conversation, and it's also meant to be shared and experienced, sometimes together. But I think that having that sort of in-person reaction and also being able to speak about it is so important, especially for a film like this, because this film is meant to make you feel something and not let you off the hook, because it's an issue that needs to, you don't want it to feel like it's going to be okay, and to get that confirmation that the film is, working on that level is truly important, because that means it's effective, and hopefully, people go home that they came with to the theater and they'll discuss about the movie, and then they'll tell their friends.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how long did it take you to write the script, and at what point were you, saying, I want to direct it, and then I'm going to wear another hat and star in it too? Like, talk about that journey.
Yeah. It took me, I didn't start writing right away. I waited a second, and I talked to some adoptees. There were five main adoptees that helped me through the entire writing process. And then, at some point I did start consulting with some impacted adoptees, people who were facing deportation or were deported. But in the beginning, I was just trying to get the authenticity of the adoptee experience first. So I think I waited about half a year before I started writing anything. And then from the first draft to what you're seeing on screen, I think it was a few years, maybe 2 or 3. And then in terms of the directing aspect of it, it was always meant for me to direct. I have not yet, and I don't know if I will write and to write. I don't know, like I'm very much a write to direct. And I feel like the writing is my first opportunity to direct, from how I write the stage direction or what happened, how the scene is blocked. So it was always meant for me to direct. The acting part of it was, there's a few things is, I did meet with some people, and what became very clear to me was that this film, after it's come out in success, would need to be talked about beyond just the release of the film. Hopefully this film can reach legislators, or, and if there's any case where it'd be helpful for the actor to go and talk to some people. It's hard to ask an actor to be involved, years after. And, these kind of films, it sometimes a word of mouth also, like, it can have a momentum that exceeds far past just the release. Also, when it goes on streaming, there usually is another life, and then people talk about it again. So I felt that I could be responsible for continuing to speak about the film with an actor that you're hiring. It's hard. Also, like, just like all that motorcycle stuff, I was like, okay, it's hard to ask. It's very dangerous, hard to ask an actor to do that, to really ride or whatever. Also, yeah, I didn't have to ask myself if I was comfortable doing whatever. I just do it. With an actor, I think there's another layer of like communication that needs to happen. Also, it's wonderful being able to act with the other actors in the scenes, and kind of, they all know that I'm in it with them. Anything I'm asking myself to do, they're seeing that, so I think there's a big trust that's built in.
Yeah. Talk about mastering Antonio's Southern accent, and the prep that you had to go into for that.
Yes. I think there's a lot of films about Louisiana or specifically New Orleans that's kind of like surface level, and it was really important to me that the world felt very real and visceral and authentic. So it was about a lot of research, and even in the casting of all the other characters, making sure that the accents were balanced and wasn't too shifted one way. So if you even look at Antonio and Kathy, their accents are different. And she, we had long discussions about what her accent should be. And then the child, a lot of times children don't take to an accent until later in life. So she doesn't have an accent. So it was about creating this mosaic that felt real and not like, sometimes you see a film and it's just like everybody's got that New York like, accent. You're like, this is ridiculous. Not everybody talks like that with that head. Like there needs to be variation that's more representative of real life. But for my accent, I modeled it after, Antonio's from St. Francisville. So I modeled it after 3 specific people. And they were of different ethnicities as well. It wasn't just white or black. It was, and they were from the region, but they had different qualities. And basically me and a dialect coach built what was important. And it was all, the accent is very intentional. It's not, we just found one person and just mimicked that, it was like, what was his socioeconomic background? Like who were the type of people that he talked to most? And we took all that kind of stuff into consideration in terms of getting it down. It's just time. It's like anything. It's just like exercise. You have to just keep at it and drill it for months. Because you want it to feel very natural and you don't want to think about it anymore. But when I was shooting, there's 2 funny stories. One funny story is me and my DP did kind of a research trip, and we drove up to San Francisco, and I started driving back to New Orleans, and I was driving and my DP was in the passenger seat, and I started to use accent, and he was just like, oh my God. It's like, are you going to talk like this for the next 4 months? Because it wasn't very good yet. So it was just me trying to, and then, the other thing was, I'm not good at going in and out. Like some people are just really great at like turning it on. I'm not. I have to, the muscles in the mouth have to kind of continue to work. So I was directing in the accent, and I think after we wrapped, I started to slowly drop it, even though like I was doing it for so long that it was still in there a bit. But people were like, this is so weird. This is what you sound like, this is your true sort of candor, but it's hard work, man. Yeah.
What did you learn from playing Antonio and going into that experience?
Oh man, there's so many different things. There's a part about being an Asian from the South. There's a part about being an adoptee. There's a part about, being a victim of child abuse, and then there's also this idea of, you feel like you have a home and you realize even your own country doesn't want you. That idea of like, that uprooting. And then also the idea of being a step parent. All these things are the mixture of who Antonio is. So, and all of them sort of need to be worked on separately, and then you bring it all together. But it's intense. I mean, it's intense. It's a lot. It's very emotional. And I'm a father. So just thinking about, the baby that's on the way that and it's like his first, blood related person in his life. And then to think about like how your step kid must feel, and that repeating of that cycle of like, I'll never do that to my kids, is abandon them. And then you're faced with this really tough decision. What do? You do what's best for the kid, or do you just blindly, follow your sort of moral compass? It's hard to, I don't know, it's really hard to just talk about it in a general sense, because it's so many things to talk about.
Yeah, I thought the opening sequence with Antonio going for the job interview, being asked, where are you from? As soon as you hear that sentence and that line, it strikes such a chord. Talk about landing, well, not just writing that in, but also filming that and editing that moment.
Well, the editing is, there's no editing. It's just on them the whole time. I don't cut away, and I do that on purpose so that you have to deal with something you're not familiar with. I think one of the reasons I placed it in the South was, Asian Americans exist in the South, and yet in media we never see it. So it feels like a novelty. and it doesn't need to be, you know, and it's about exposure. So I just put the camera, and you're meant to deal with this guy that has these tattoos and has this, you know, Southern Louisianan accent, has a little white girl, you know, right next to him, being asked where he's from, you know. And I think that once you get over that, once you see that scene, you're exposed to it, you forget like, oh, he's Asian. You forget like, oh, look at his, like, listen to his accent. You forget like he's Asian but has a whites, because you've dealt with it already. I didn't want the audience to be just constantly thinking about that the whole movie. Ultimately, you just want to see he's just an American man, right, dealing with just life, you know. And so that's why that scene is shot like that. And shooting it, you know, I also, the big thing was on the opposite side of the camera, when I was looking for that actor, his voice and his accent was also important, because there should be some camaraderie. I mean, they feel like they're from the same clan. They have some similar elements in the way they speak and regionally and all that stuff. Yet for the guy on the other side of the camera, he's this sort of alien, you know. But I think shooting it was very important. I mean, that scene's very important because it's so much of what, as an immigrant, you know, I was born here, but like I've been asked that question so many damn times in my life, and I probably will continue to be asked that. And I don't resent the question, but I think it's worth just putting out there, and you feel maybe what we feel when every time we're asked that question.
Yeah, amazing. You also got Alicia Vikander to sing Blue Bayou, and I think that was my trigger moment. It was so beautiful. How did you even get clearance for that? And where did the idea, like how early in the process did you want that moment and that song?
Yeah, it was quite early. You know, it was quite early. I was thinking, even just from the very beginning, when I was like just starting to write it, what should the title of this film be? It might be a sort of a compass for me themically. And I just was like, well, you know, the bayou is so important, and I want this, you know, this thing with the mother having tried to drown, you know, his son or her son. And so I thought of Blue Bayou, and then I thought of Linda Ronstadt's version of Blue Bayou. I love Linda Ronstadt. I think she's such a prolific, you know, artist, and she was so diverse in the styles of music. She's iconic, you know. And I think that I was like, let me go listen to that song, and I just listened to the lyrics. I was like, oh my God, I feel like this is what this family's going through. I think the struggle of just daily life and just trying to keep your shit together. And I just was like, this song would be so beautiful if it's saying somewhere in the middle of the film that it's like you're faced with reality of what their situation is. And I, you know, and then it's one thing like dreaming up the most perfect song that you want to put in your film, and it's another thing to try to go get it. So I wrote it in, so it's like so dangerous, you know. I wrote it in, and I, you know, not knowing, and then, you know, we got a quote, and it was astronomical, and I was like, oh my God, this is like a smaller film, we don't have that big of a budget. I'm like, but I need this song. So through, I think, one of the music supervisors, I was like, hey, if I wrote Linda a letter, do you think you can get it to her? So I wrote her a letter. I told her what the film was about, why it was important, and what the song represented, and why I thought it was absolutely necessary, and if there's any way she could help us out. And she did. She got the letter. She gave us the song for a lot cheaper than the original price, and that's how it's in the film. Now, getting Alicia to sing is a whole nother, you know, because it, you know, she told me she's never sang in a film, and, you know, it's very exposing, and it's very, you feel naked, and it's you know, it's a very nerve-wracking thing. So also that day we filmed it, it was really cold. So that's why you can see her breath. But so, it's not the great condition for you to perform well. But I told her, I was like, I'm not interested in you singing this well. I'm interested in the emotion behind it, and so don't worry. It's like whatever version you do is perfect as long as it's felt. But to our surprise, I heard her sing it the first time, like right before we shot. And I was like, what are you worried about? Like, this is wonderful. It's like, you're fantastic singer. And I can't wait for the world to see, like, actually, like, got some pipes. And then, later on, we met in Hawaii. She was in Hawaii for a second, and we went to karaoke. And she was like, you know what we're going to do today? You're going to sing Blue Bayou. And I sang it, and I was like, oh my God, actually, this song's really hard because it goes pretty high when you start belting it. And she was like, see what you made me do, So that was quite entertaining.
Yeah. How much did the script change? Like, because you were writing it over, the course of, the years that you spent.
It changed quite a bit, and mostly because not because like the structure or I was trying to build in more entertainment. It was actually through the notes of the adoptees that made a change. So like every draft was read by an adoptee, and vetted, and anything that felt inauthentic, I changed. An example is, I read, I wrote, his child being born, and one of my friends who's an adoptee told me that it's one of the biggest moments in your life because finally, there's somebody that's blood related, and that's can be a very emotional moment. So I made sure that the script represented that. When they're on the pier, there's this sort of trope or toxic sort of idea that adoptees' parents like hated them or didn't want them or wanted to kill them, and it's not true. Sometimes it's truly circumstance, and of course they're their parents, and so there's some dialogue I changed there. And then the biggest change was the ending. Once I brought in the impacted adoptees, people who were faced with deportation or have been deported, they're like, listen, because there's their alternate ending, and it was still not happy, but it was a little bit more hopeful. And they were like, we don't think it's right if you offer any hope at all. Like, that's not how we felt when we were kicked out of the country. We truly feel like, is there another way? And I was like, yeah, there is. There's another way to end this that I've always thought about is when he's being led away. And they were like, yeah, we feel like that's more accurate, to our experience. And I was like, okay. So then it was going to sort of battle with the producers because they're like, those kind of endings, like, it's harder to get people in the theater and blah, blah, blah. I was like, but why are we making this film? We're making this film for adoptees and their experience. We got to be authentic about that. So ultimately they completely agreed. And that was changed, because of their input.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to something you said earlier about the motorbikes. Did you have to learn to ride a motorbike? And
I had a motorcycle at 20 and I rode for a few years, and then but then maybe 24 I sold it because I was like, probably a good idea, like I'm stop while I'm ahead. But then so I wrote this in. I didn't know I was going to play this role. I didn't I wasn't planning on it. So, but once it was decided and the producers were like, okay, yeah, you can do it, you can play the role, I was like, okay, well, what are the things I need to do? I need to get that accent down. I probably need I put on about 35 pounds. And then the other thing was riding motorcycles. So I went back. I had let my license expire. So I had to go back and do a CHP course to get my license reinstated. And then, and then I had to go, ride and get really comfortable again. So most of that riding in the film is me. except for, you know, some of the stunt stuff that like is probably too dangerous for me to do. But it was exhilarating. I mean, it was so like fully immersive that I was able to, you know, and also there's that one, you know, after he gets beat up and he goes to Kathy's house, and, you know, Antonio is quite battered, and he's writing with one hand with his other hand like hanging off. I can't believe they let me do that. I can't believe they let me do that. There was a few things that like, you know, because I'm writing with one hand, I'm on a street, and the other one is where there's that slow zoom while I'm writing and I split off. Yeah. I'm like about 1.5 feet from the sidecar with a hand up, and I'm going about 50 miles an hour, and I have to kind of, my periphery just gauge the distance so that like the zoom can be a little bit more steady. I can't believe they let me do that either. But we did, and you know, it was really exciting to be able to film that stuff.
Yeah. Well, you escaped unscared, which is, you know, the great thing. How do you pick roles? Like, what are you looking for in projects?
At this point, I mean, here's the other thing, you know, like this business and this profession is so hard that sometimes you have to take the role for money. We all, you know, there's a base sort of, you know, I'd like to say I'm like so idealistic that, and most of the time I am, but, you know, if I was hard up and I needed some money, that could be, you know, but, you know, on an artistic level, at this stage of my career, I'm really looking for things that have a bigger purpose, that say something, you know. The only other acting job I've done in the last few years besides Blue Bayou was I did a film with Wayne Wang. He's a director of Joy Luck Club, but he's also like in the, at least in the Asian American community, he's the first like real indie filmmaker. His movies, Chan is Missing, Eatable Tea, is on Criterion now, and you know, a chance to work with a legend like that, like I jumped at that, and it was also about a son cooking the last meal for his mother who's dying of cancer. I mean, like there's such purpose in that, and ways to speak about my community and bring empathy to my community that I think is very valuable. So that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for, you know, things that can move the needle in terms of like the way other people look at my community. Because of course, like I'm Asian, so like, you know, my face, how I'm represented on screen is very important to me. I'll do anything that has that sort of purpose. Yeah. And you know, but I'm so much more pickier now. I just like, because, you know, I have this other avenue, which is writing and directing, and it's quite fulfilling. So I don't have the need to go audition. And man, I feel for us, because, you know, I started in 2001, so it's been 20 years. The decade, you know, I mean, decade and a half of auditioning. God, it's a tough life. It's just brutal. It's just brutal. I just like trying to go in there and just trying to like show what you guys like. No, thank you. Next. It's just you work on this audition for like a few days and you really pour your heart and soul, and you're just like, what do they want? I mean, it's just like, you know, and then you're like, go through this whole mental cycle of like, well, don't care about what they think, do it for yourself. But like, it's such a psychological Olympics, man. It's I don't know if it's even great for your mental health. I don't know. Like, you know, you're just like, who am I? So I feel for any actor that is doing it, because it's a tough life.
Yeah. On that note, what advice would you give to your fellow actors who are tuning in today? I mean, you transitioned into this wearing not just the acting hat, but director and screenwriter.
So for the actors, the advice to the actors,
yeah,
I don't know. It's always like, find a way to keep the joy in it. It's the hardest thing to do, is like when something also is your profession and money's involved. But I always try to think of how to go back to that place when I first started acting, and I would do it for free. Right. And just for the love of it, and the amount of work I would put in. just because I enjoy it. You know, like I remember saying when I first started, you know what, I'd be really satisfied if I could even just do theater, community theater, if it paid me enough just to cover my basic needs. And then of course you get a little bit, and then you continually want more and more. And I think that's where I feel like I got a little bit unhappy, because frankly, I didn't give a shit like how much I was going to get paid for Blue Bayou. I didn't like that, like, you know, and you know, the accent coach and all that, like that was out of my own pocket, you know, like I paid for that because I thought it was important for my acting and the character and the representation. And I think that that finding that sort of sense of joy in the reason why you started is really important. But man, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's also, it's such a hard thing to do. The other thing I would say is make sure you take care of your body, because it's your instrument. And I think, you know, as actors, we kind of forget that sometimes, and we just kind of do whatever. But like, man, if you've ever been on a set, it's physically demanding. You're doing these long hours, you know, you're expected to perform in harsh elements. So I think on the off time, taking care of your body, maintaining that, and also your mental health, your instrument, I think is really important.
Amazing. Justin, on behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, thank you for sharing your experience, process, and craft with fellow performers, and congratulations on Blue Bayou. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.